My favorite game series, without a doubt, is Pokemon. I grew up watching the anime, I grew up collecting the cards, even though I didn't know how to play the game, and all I ever wanted to do was ingest and inhale anything Pokemon at all. And it wasn't until, I don't even remember what year exactly, but it wasn't until a lot later that I finally played my first Pokemon game. So what we're going to do today is kind of talk a little bit about my journey through Pokemon, but not so much through the lens of being a kid as much as the lens of as an adult. So I only ever played two core series games and one spin-off game when I was growing up. So we'll briefly go over those, but what I want to talk more about today is me playing the games as an adult, because I've had the opportunity to collect all those games and to play, I think, most of them. At least most of the core series. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about my playing growing up. So when I was growing up, everything was usually a battle between Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Not literally, but for Yu-Gi-Oh!, for example, I actually played the game. Yu-Gi-Oh!, I played the video game. I watched the anime. Pokemon, I collected the cards. Yu-Gi-Oh!, I also collected the cards. So I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Got a little bit of an edge while I was growing up, only because I was able to do more with it, and I actually understood how to play the game, and I guess I just kind of resonated more with Yu-Gi-Oh! But as I've gotten older, Pokemon definitely had a way bigger impact. And the first game I ever played was Pokemon Fire Red. So I believe this game came out in 2006. So at some point in 2006 or thereafter, I remember obviously knowing what Pokemon was. I was a huge Pokemon fan, just didn't play the games. And I was on my way to a Boy Scout event when I was really, really little. And my dad and I were at Target, and I saw it brand new in Target for $20. And I said, "Dad, can you please get that? I have a gift card at home. I want to play this game." So he got it, and I think I spent so much time with Fire Red. I never beat it, but yeah, Fire Red was my first game. I got up to like the SSN part, and then I guess I just kind of stopped understanding what to do. Understanding what to do? Yeah. So I didn't get super far in this game, but I do have great memories of it. And then the game I actually beat for the first time, the second core series game I played while growing up, was Pokemon Diamond. And I remember getting this one for my birthday when I was a lot younger, and I got it in the morning for my birthday, and then I went to school and I came home, and then I played this nonstop. I had just gotten a DS at the same time, so DS plus Diamond, that was the entirety of my day for one of my birthdays. So that was a big deal. And then to kind of go along with Pokemon Diamond, there was also a spin-off game, Pokemon Battle Revolution, which is basically the Pokemon Stadium games, which we might talk about in a little bit. But with compatibility for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl at the time, I don't remember if Pokemon Platinum was compatible with it, but I remember I had Diamond, my friend had Diamond, so him and I would link up through Battle Revolution and get to watch all the battles on the big screen, which is pretty cool. And that's as far as me playing Pokemon as a child went. Like I said, watched the anime, played the games, but that was as far as it went. And you might notice that Fire Red is Gen 1 and Diamond is Gen 4. I remember watching the anime from Gen 2, but I kind of like dipped out of Pokemon a little bit during Gen 3, or maybe I just wasn't as attentive. I mean, I was a kid, right? So Gen 3, I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for it, and we're gonna kind of talk about that as we go. So I missed playing the Gen 2 games. I played a remake of the Gen 1 games, and that kind of sets the stage for games that I played that I also didn't get to play. So with that said, come December 2018, I started collecting games. I so distinctly remember I was in my college dorm, one of my suite mates, I walked into his part of the suite, and I saw him playing a Pokemon game on a Game Boy Color. And I was like, I never had the opportunity to do that. I had Fire Red, I had it on Game Boy Advance, but I didn't get to play any of the Game Boy Color games. I didn't even have a Game Boy Color. I didn't have an original Game Boy either. All I had was Game Boy Advance, which obviously that took me a very long way, but there's a lot that I missed in the very early stages of Pokemon. So that is 100% the catalyst for why I started collecting. I remember seeing that and going, I wish I did that. And the rest is kind of history, because now we have an entire channel to talk about this stuff. But then. That was when I was in college. So the rest is history in terms of collecting, but that doesn't cover all the games that I have played since I've been an adult. So we're going to go through all the games in order, mostly in order in which I played them, maybe some stories behind how I got the games, and what I think of those games. So I think my some of my opinions might be a little they might be some hot takes, but I think I'm justified in a lot of them. So the very first Pokemon game I got in terms of collecting, Fire Red. I had sold Fire Red and Diamond growing up. That's just kind of what kids did when it came to games. So I ended up selling Fire Red and Diamond, but I did get Fire Red. Not first. I ended up getting a repro by accident. But the first game I officially got, the first Pokemon game I got while collecting, was Pokemon Emerald in Gen 3. So I just mentioned that I kind of skipped through Gen 3, and this was the first Gen 3 game I've ever owned. I got Emerald first. In that first month of us collecting, we went to a game store. I was just starting to discover game stores, and we went to the game store, and they had 2 copies of Pokemon Emerald. At the time, Emerald was $25. It's now $200, so that says a lot, but they had 2 copies, and I remember saying, can I get 1 copy? Okay. Person goes to the place where it was locked up, got the game, and brought it back. And somebody right behind me said, can I get the other one? So, okay, they went and got that one. So when I was being rung up, they accidentally put both copies in my bag. And I kind of noticed it while I was being rung up, but I didn't want to say something to look stupid. So it wasn't until I got outside, looked into my bag and go, oh, there's 2 Pokemon Emeralds in there. And I went back inside and gave the other one back. From a financial standpoint, not the best move I've ever made, but from a normal adjusted human's standpoint, that was obviously the right thing to do. So Emerald, first game I ever got while collecting, not including Fire Red and Diamond, to get games back. This is a game I never owned growing up. And my first goal in terms of playing Pokemon as an adult was to complete the Gen 3 Pokedex. So that means playing all of Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green to as much as I need to complete the Pokedex in 1 cartridge. So I did that. I played through almost all 5 games. Fire Red was my base game. I had to play through Leaf Green twice to get 2 of the legendary beasts and the 2 starters. I had to play through Emerald once, I think. And then I had to play a little bit of Ruby and Sapphire just to get version exclusive there. And that was the reason why I started playing Gen 3 in the first place. And not gonna lie, it's a little weird for me playing Gen 3 because I know that it was popular when I was growing up, but having that little gap between watching the Gen 2 anime and then playing Gen 4, I am not nostalgic for Gen 3 at all. And actually, whenever I play like a ROM hack of a Gen 3 game, I kind of have to use a guide every time because I am so lost every time. Fire Red, I can play with the back of my hand. Going through Sabrina's maze, I can do it no problem. But I just can't do it in the Gen 3 games, and that makes me kind of sad. But Gen 3, in terms of the original 4 generations I grew up with, is actually at the bottom for me. Gen 1, I gotta say I'm a Gen 1er. Whether you like it or not, I'm a Gen 1er. And then I would say Gen 2, because I think I remember Gen 2 a little bit better in terms of the anime. And then Gen 4 would be a close second, because I actually played that game, and I did really love Pokemon Diamond. But of the original generations, Generation 3 has to be all the way at the bottom for me. 1, 2, 4, and then 50 feet of crap and Gen 3. Not saying that Emerald is a bad game, not saying that Ruby and Sapphire are bad games, because they were tremendous games, and they took huge leaps for the Pokemon formula in terms of, from Game Boy Color to Game Boy Advance. But it's just not for me. It's kind of sad. It kind of stinks. But that wouldn't be the last time I ended up playing through the Gen 3 games on actual cartridge, because 2 summers ago, I think, I did the crazy and decided to complete every Pokedex in every Gen 3 cartridge. That meant catching as many of each Pokemon as I needed to get them into all games. I never ended up finishing it in terms of getting a living dex, so we might have imported some saved file Pokemon, if you know what I mean. But Generation 3 was the first generation I played completely through, in terms of the games. And yeah, I don't regret it, even though Generation 3 is not my favorite. Getting to play through Hoenn a couple times has definitely filled in that gap, even if it's not a gap I probably needed to fill, whatever that means. But then we move on. So after the Gen 3 games, not in order of which I collected them, but the next order in which I played the games is the Gen 1 and Gen 2 games. So like I was saying, my suite mate was playing probably Pokemon Red, or maybe it was Pokemon Gold in our suite, and I was like, okay, didn't have those games, gotta get those back. So in the time collecting, I got all these games in a different order, but the next order in which I played these games was the Generation 1 and Generation 2 games. And I have, like I said, a little nostalgia because I even remember seeing people growing up playing, Red, Blue, Yellow, and Gold, Silver, Crystal, and I just didn't. So, there's Red, Blue, Yellow, there's Gold, Silver, Crystal. I think I played through Red just to say I played through Red once, and then I think I played through Crystal just to say I played through Crystal, so that I said I could play a Gen 1, Gen 2 game, but I think it was last summer, or maybe it was a winter, or maybe it probably took a little bit of time, but just like I did for the Gen 3 games, I went through all 6 cartridges and completed the Pokedex in all 6 cartridges. So that did not require nearly as much cheating, but yeah, it was nice to finally go through and play these games, and it's hard to go back to them without some sort of quality of life upgrades, because they're kind of hard to play, right? If you're gonna play Gen 1, you might as well play Fire Red. Not that Red is a bad game, but it's a little hard to go back to. But it definitely cured the itch of, like, I didn't have that game growing up, but now I finally got to play it, and that was really, really spectacular for me. So I'm really happy I got to go back and play those. And that's kind of all I'm able to say about those games in particular. However, that doesn't mean that's where the journey with those Gen 1 and 2 games ends, because at some point while doing this challenge of completing the decks in every game, I was like, there has to be a better way to play these games. And there was. So I learned about Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. 1 because they're Pokemon games and naturally I had to collect them, but I learned that you could play the Gen 1 and Gen 2 games faster. So very exciting time for the Nintendo 64, where you could use a transfer pack, plug in a Gen 1 or 2 game into a transfer pack into the controller, and it connects with these cartridges, which is really, really cool. But for me, what I was most concerned about is just getting through the games because they took so long. So you could play them at like 2 times speed, 3 times speed, 4 times speed, something to that effect. I think you could do it faster in Stadium than you could in Stadium 1. I don't quite remember the particulars, but I remember saying, okay, I got to get through Stadium and Stadium 2 so I could play the Gen 1 and 2 games faster. And so I did. So Stadium 1 and 2 are very, very difficult games to beat, in my opinion. We might have used some polished Pokemon to... some Game Shark sitting around somewhere. We might have used a Game Shark to polish up some Pokemon to get through those challenges, but these were hard to unlock everything, but I'm glad I finally did. I did not know what a Nintendo 64 was growing up. I never had any exposure to the Nintendo 64, so it wasn't until I started collecting that I got Stadium 1 and 2, or even heard about them, but I'm glad I got them. Stadium 1 I remember getting for Christmas because early in collecting I was like, oh, these games are very plentiful. I could just have somebody go to the game store and just say they want it and it's there. And that wasn't true, but thankfully they did happen to have it when somebody went to go get that for me for Christmas. Stadium 2, I remember being at the same game store and asking, like, do you have Pokemon Stadium 2? And they said, no, but we're expecting a copy in soon. I said, oh, okay, when is it coming in? And they told me, let's say Monday. So I was there on Monday at the time they said it was going to be, and it wasn't. And I was like, oh, well, is there any way I could put it on hold when it does come in? And the owner was very kind and put it on hold for me because I said I was going to be there when he said I was going to be there. So he was kind in doing that and holding it for me for a few days. But it is cool to get Stadium 1 and 2 because they're just games I did not know what they were growing up. So that's pretty cool to go back and play those. But after that, that's kind of where the Gen 1 and 2 story ends, just playing through all those games, getting that experience of living in the mid to late 90s and playing those games. And yeah, so we move forward. I don't think there was also any exciting stories regarding how I got any of those games. I think they just all happened to be available in places or in game stores when I wanted them. Oh, one I can think of is Pokemon Yellow. I remember being on like OfferUp or like was it Whatnot? Not Whatnot, but like one of those like marketplace apps, and somebody was selling a yellow Game Boy Color with Pokemon Yellow for $30. It was a very different time for collecting to be able to get that deal. So I was able to get that. Red and Blue, I think I got normally. Gold and Silver, I definitely got normally. Silver was also one of the first games I got, even though I didn't play it right away. I think I got it around the same time as I got Emerald, actually, now that I think about it. And Crystal, I remember the store that I went to, it was $35 at the time. It is no longer $35, unfortunately. But I remember saying, do you guys have Pokemon Crystal? And he pulled out a bag of them. Yes, my cartridge is real. All of those cartridges were real, but for some reason, the guy had like 8 or 10 copies of Pokemon Crystal, which is pretty cool. Just a story I remember. But okay, let's get off the topic of Game Boy and Game Boy Color games and move forward, because it starts to tumble down a little bit. Not in a bad way, but the rest of the progression makes a lot of sense because now I've played games I didn't play before, and now just playing games I collected. So the next challenge I wanted to do was to complete the Gen 4 dexes. So I did the Gen 3 dexes. Then I did the Gen 1 and 2 Gen 1 and 2 dexes. So naturally came the Gen 4 dex. And I played Generation 4. Obviously, you saw that I played Diamond, but it did give me an opportunity to play through all the the Gen 4 games. In particular, I never played Pokemon Platinum. My friend had Platinum growing up. I did not. And yeah, I was able to play through Platinum for the first time. Not as crazy a different story from Diamond. Platinum is this third version kind of Pokemon that offered improvements to Diamond and Pearl. So it was cool to play through it. I liked the Giratina storyline a little bit more. Not a little bit more. I like the storyline. It is very cool, especially when you're in like the Distortion World, right? Distortion World. That map is a little crazy to go through, but very, very cool. So this was part of that. I never actually finished the Gen 4 Dex challenge just because it is long. There's a lot of Pokemon. It's hard to do in Gen 3. Add more work in Gen 4. So that's a little bit of work. But when I also say Gen 4 games, I also include the remakes for Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So notice I have Platinum and Soul Silver in boxes, but I don't have Heart Gold and Pearl in boxes, so I'm not going to take those out just to show the tiny cartridges. But it did also give me an opportunity to play through Heart Gold and Soul Silver because they were remixed to Gold and Silver that I had just played. So it was nice to see the update from Gold Silver to Heart Gold Soul Silver, just kind of like the same way as I got to see the difference between Red and Blue and Fire Red and Leaf Green. So that was cool too. So funny story about Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I actually got these two games at the same time. Around the same time I was doing like that OfferUp, that marketplace binge kind of, and some guy had had loose copies of Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Platinum. And at the time I offered him $100 for all three because that was a mostly normal deal. So we met up. I got Platinum. I got what ended up being a fake version of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Traded money, and he left, and then he blocked me on the app, and I was so confused as to why. And it took me about a year to find out that Heart Gold and Soul Silver were fake, and that's why he wanted to get away so quick, which is kind of sad. Be careful buying games. Do it smartly, please and thank you. But the Platinum was real. Platinum at the time, I would have paid $50 for it, so that was a good deal, even so now, because it's an expensive game. But then over time I was able to get real versions of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Heart Gold I was able to get from a friend who he had all the games growing up. Like I had one friend who got like one version of each game, but then we had another friend who had every version of every game that released while we were growing up. So friend 1 asked friend 2, hey, can I buy your Soul Silver when we were in like high school? And so he did. So I texted that same friend while we were collecting, so this is now like 10 years later, and I was like, hey, do you also have a copy of Heart Gold? He said he looked around, couldn't find it. We were doing a little get-together at my house, and he walked in, and he goes, this is for you. Pulls out a Heart Gold cartridge and said, this is for you. At the time, Heart Gold and Soul Silver were pretty expensive, and I was like, dude, thank you so much. Can I give you money or anything? And he said no. So that was very kind. So Nick, in the unlikely event that you're watching, thank you so much. But I think we ended up working out something later on because he ended up selling all his games, and we helped him out with that. So that was cool. SoulSilver, I ended up getting at the same game store as I got most of these games, and at the time I think this was 110 at the time, and this is a part of the big box that Heart Gold and SoulSilver came in, but just the inner part. So no manual or anything here. So I think the cartridge is also sitting in a DS somewhere. I don't know, I gotta find that. But I do have the game, even though if you saw that there's no cartridge in here. So that was cool. Played Gen 4. That was very exciting. And up to that point, everything I was comfortable with. I knew Gen 1, I knew Gen 2, I sort of knew Gen 3, and I knew Gen 4 like the back of my hand. So I hadn't played anything new up to this point, and that was kind of weird. And it wasn't until finally, in October 2021, did that start to change. So October 2021 was when the Switch OLED released, and at the time, I did not have a Switch. Switch was 4 years old at the time, never once played a Switch. I might have played Smash or Mario Kart like once, but not for very long. I didn't own a Switch. I didn't play Switch. I was kind of out of like this Nintendo realm for a while. Even while I was collecting, I was kind of collecting all old games and didn't have any intentions of collecting Switch. So Nintendo and Game Freak announced these two games, and when these two games were released, I said, okay, I have to get a Switch to play these games. They announced Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Still nothing crazy, they're just remakes of Gen 4, but it did give me an opportunity to replay Gen 4 and to get a Switch and to start experiencing all new games. So not much I could say about these two, besides the fact that they're the reason I got a Switch in the first place, because it's still Gen 4. I still haven't tried anything new. And then if you look even further, just a few months after Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl came to Pokemon Legends Arceus, which this is still Gen 4. It's got stuff from other generations. So, it did give me a little glimpse into what other generations look like. Some of the starters are Rowlet and Oshawott on top of Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil I knew from Gen 2, but I didn't know Oshawott and I didn't know Rowlet as well as I knew Cyndaquil. So, on top of other Pokemon being available, this gave me my first look into some of that. So that was very exciting. But then finally, it wasn't until November 2022, which is crazy to think that was a year and a half ago, that I finally had a proper re-entry into Pokemon in terms of playing something new. Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus, they're not re-entries. They're Gen 4 games, even though the Legends Arceus formula is a little different. But for the first time, I played a brand new Pokemon game when I got Scarlet and Violet in November 2022. I think it was released right around my birthday, because my birthday is in November. And this was the first time I tried a new Pokemon game since I was an adult. So it was cool as an adult to go back and play games I didn't have, or play games I didn't get to experience. For example, didn't have Platinum, didn't have Heart Gold, Soul Silver, definitely didn't have Stadium, didn't have Gen 3 games. So to this point, it was all kind of stuff I was mostly familiar with. But playing Gen 9 was completely brand new to me, right? Nobody had played Gen 9. It was brand new at the time. And I gotta say, I love the Gen 9 games. These are very hated games because they run a little poorly, which is true. There are times that there are really weird glitches for absolutely no reason. But when I say I fully enjoyed my time in Scarlet and Violet, I fully enjoyed my time in Scarlet and Violet. I played both. I played both so I could trade between the two until I learned I couldn't trade between the two because that's not how trading works in Scarlet and Violet. But I still played through both. And up until the DLC, I played it almost every day. I would do Terra raids every day. It was cool to complete a Pokedex and hear about all these Terra raids of new Pokemon that were coming. So these were really exciting for me because I felt like I was back into Pokemon and I could finally break the seal of playing games that I hadn't played before. And Scarlet and Violet did that first for me. So I love these games. I don't care about the performance. I just really like the games. So that was how we got back into Pokemon with Gen 9. So in terms of where Gen 9 sits, I got to create separate categories for how I rank Pokemon games. in terms of, one category is how I grew up, and that was the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 4, Gen 3 rank I had before. But if I'm putting a ranking on how I feel about the generations now as an adult, it's still Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 4, just because that's what I'm nostalgic for. But 1, 2, 4, 3, where there's a big gap between Gens 4 and 3 for growing up. Scarlet and Violet are right below Gen 4 for me because I really, really enjoyed it, but I can't quite shake the nostalgia. So if I was stuck with 4 sets of Pokemon games the rest of my life, it would be Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 4, and then Gen 9. I would completely leave Gen 3 in the dust, and that is still very true. So that was Gen 9. So going on the trail of playing the Switch games, then that meant that another generation I had to play was Generation 8. So I tried playing Generation 8, and I don't know if I just wasn't in the mood to play or if I was like Pokemon out or what, but I think I played about 2 hours of Generation 8 and put it down and have not picked it back up since. I don't feel anything for those games. I know that there was a little bit of controversy for Gen 8 because of Dexit, where they didn't include every Pokemon through all the DLC, so that was kind of unfortunate. But I just couldn't get behind it. I don't know if it's because my friends say they're not good games, but Gen 8 just wasn't it for me. So Gen 8 actually has to sit below Gen 3 because I at least finished Gen 3. And then that gets to the point where we need to fill the gap between Generation 4 and Generation 8. And we are now getting into the last little bit of games I have played. So if there's a gap between Generation 4 and 8, that means I have to play Generations 5, 6, and 7. And on Pokemon Day this year, Game Freak announced that there was going to be a Legends game based around Gen 6. That doesn't mean I've played Gen 6. So I own the 3DS games because eShop was closing, everybody went mad, so I had to buy the Gen 6 games. But I have yet to play X and Y because that's Generation 6. And what comes before Generation 6? Generation 5. So this is the last Pokemon game I have played in its entirety. I only have the box for Pokemon Black, so I'm only going to show off Black. But I have played through Black, then I played through Black 2, and then I played through White. And I haven't played through White 2 yet. I'm a little gassed out of Pokemon. I will get to it at some point, but I said I can't play the Gen 6 games without playing Gen 4. I needed a little bit of continuity there, so I said, okay, let's break this Gen 5 seal. That's when I got out of Pokemon. That's when I got out of video games when I was growing up. So this is sort of me throwing it back to what could have been when I was growing up in terms of playing Pokemon. It would have been Black and White next for me, and I just never experienced that. But when I say Generation 5 has to be some of the most beautiful games in the entire series, I don't know how else I can say that, because I was kind of expecting just like another Diamond and Pearl or Platinum or Heart Gold, SoulSilver, and I already noticed even before I understood graphics at all. I don't really understand graphics, but I understand graphics a little bit more now. I was like, okay, the progression from Diamond and Pearl to Heart Gold, SoulSilver is actually pretty good. There's a lot of smaller details, a lot of things that make those games look very pretty, and I was kind of just expecting small upgrades. Nope. What I didn't realize is that with the introduction of Gen 5, they made so many changes to the Pokemon formula in terms of just how the games look. And when I say Generation 5 is a masterpiece in the Pokemon series, Generation 5 is a masterpiece. Absolutely. The games are beautiful. The things that this game is capable of doing in terms of hardware or just graphics in general is crazy. You would not realize Diamond and Pearl and Black and White are on the same system because they are just so incredible to look at. And it was so much fun to play. All brand new Pokemon, just like Gen 9. It was very fresh for me. Gen 9 had some repeating Pokemon, whereas Gen 5 had... the big thing about Gen 5 was that the main game only had a finite number of new Pokemon, no old Pokemon. So everything you did in Gen 5 had to be brand new. And for me, that was actually kind of exciting now that I wasn't so scared of playing these games. So this is the last game I played. Gen 5 is absolutely fantastic. If you want some kind of final ranking here as an adult, 1, 2, 4, 9, 5, all very close. 3 is somewhere down there, and 8 has to be somewhere down there, but we probably shouldn't count that. I didn't finish those games. But if it wasn't for the fact that Gen 9 was my re-entry, and I now feel nostalgic for Gen 9, Gen 5 would be right below Gen 4 because these Gen 5 games are fantastic. So, that's my story playing Pokemon games as an adult. Got to play games I didn't have growing up, got to play brand new games at launch, and yeah, very exciting for me, very weird. That still means Gen 6 and Gen 7 are completely untouched by my hands. I've never played XY, never played Sun Moon, never played Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire or Ultra Sun Ultra Moon. So at some point we'll get to those. Going forward, my goal is to finish White 2. I did Black 2, I did White. Now I got to do White 2. But the thing I should have mentioned, or not should have mentioned, by now I really like completing Pokemon dexes, or Pokedexes. So I've been trying to do that in the Gen 5 games as I go, just collecting the Pokemon that are on the cartridge, not trading at all. I leave that for later. So it takes me about a month to get through Black 2 and White. So getting through White 2 will take me about another month. At least now I know exactly where I'm going in all those games, so that's pretty cool. But that's the next chapter of playing Pokemon games, White 2. But the most important part is getting through at least X and Y by the time that Pokemon Legends ZA comes out in 2025. We don't need to have this conversation here, but potentially on the next iteration of the Switch, the next Nintendo console, but we don't need to speculate about that here. So, yeah, I'm a Pokemon freak. If you look at my desk right now where I've been putting all the games after I talk about them, there's a lot of Pokemon games on my desk. It's kind of a mess. But yeah, this was really exciting for me to talk about. It was nice to kind of put all of these games in some kind of chronological order in terms of how I played them and kind of my story behind them. And I hope the story was entertaining for you. Not a lot of crazy information about these games that, if you're a Pokemon fan, you didn't already know. But I hope it was interesting for you to at least hear my story with the games and my very, very bizarre ranking. So, in a small chance to try and get some crowd engagement, tell me your rankings of the Pokemon generations. Just to reiterate, for me, see if you match up. 1, 2, 4, 9, 5, Gap 3, and then 8 if we even want to count it. So 6 and 7 aren't on there. But please let me know what yours is. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sticking around. And I hope this was entertaining, if not so educational. So with that said, bye.